Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to circle back on one of our first episodes where we talked about the pandemic and how it was affecting our world and work and what we thought would happen after a vaccine was developed and people started to get back to work. Well, here we are, almost a year later, since we posted that podcast to talk about it once again. Oh, Demetrius, what a journey it has been since we started this. I often wonder if I even truly realize all that has happened since we posted that podcast. How are you doing with everything?
Well, I guess a little bit vindicated about a lot of things we said before because a lot of it has come to pass. And I think now the question is which of these things, which we hypothesized originally, that these, for the most part, were accelerating change that was already in progress.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question now is which of these changes are here to stay and which of them are kind of going back to the way it was before.
I mean, when you reflect on the day that we did that podcast and we were talking about all of our kind of ideas and predictions and things like that, like there was no vaccine in the near future. People thought that they were going to be home for 3 months, and 17 months later, people started entering the world again. Instead, 3 to 17, which is like a huge jump. Um, we had to go through some pretty dark times with case counts going through the roof, people having to, work remotely. Those who couldn't work remotely were out in their cars with masks and gloves on. When you reflect on what has happened over the last year, do you feel like a lot has changed, or do you feel like we are kind of getting back to normal and during that time it was just like a chaos moment?
It's hard to put my finger on it because change can be the kind of thing that creeps in on a day-to-day basis. When you had the shutdown, and that was a big change, but after that, things just kind of gradually adapted, and that's kind of what people are. They're very adaptive, and I think that there are quite a few things that kind of became normal or started to feel normal. And now we'll see kind of as things open up, which things people tend to prefer. Like I think working remotely works really well in some cases and less well in others. And then people gradually figuring out which one is which is going to be kind of where the rubber meets the road going forward.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about it, we were saying like, hey, we've been talking about remote work for literally a decade. And we have these tools like Skype and, the more newer ones like Zoom and things like that. And it works well. And in our space, technology, people were using these tools already. It just wasn't common practice to stay home all the time. That was a very small percentage. I think like probably 10% of a company or maybe 15% of a company had people who were 100% remote workers. We've met them, we've worked with them.
Oh yeah.
And it was more of like a fringe thing. Now it's becoming more mainstream. So, how do you feel about this transition to companies basically putting a stake in the ground and saying, by all means, if you want to stay remote for the rest of your existence at our company or in your career, you can do it without penalty? Do you feel like this is the right decision for these companies to be making, specifically tech companies?
I think it is. I think there are certain circumstances in which you'd want to have people in person more. Like if you're working on hardware, it makes sense. If you're working on perishable things, if you're working on food, for example, my partner is a chef, so it makes a lot of sense for her to be in person in the restaurant preparing food. If you're in a test kitchen preparing, developing new foods or something like that, that makes a lot of sense. If you're working on something that has some level of ergonomics and you need to get a bunch of different hands to work with this mouse or keyboard or whatever it is, then I think it's good to be in person. If you're young and you need to build up your social networks, your professional social networks, then I think it's really useful. But if if you're established in your career, if you're 10 years in and you're like, I don't necessarily need to live in this particular location for whatever reason, maybe it's expensive, maybe there's a crunch of people, maybe you're just ready for a change, then I think it's great that they can open up and decide to live wherever they want. If they want to live in Hawaii, if they want to live in Montana, if they want to live wherever, I think it kind of spreads the wealth a little bit of the resources around the country. Can help some economic development in areas that might not traditionally be. Can alleviate some of the congestion and housing constraints and things in places like LA or New York or Silicon Valley. And at the same time, it just gives people a lot more flexibility. You spend a lot less time like commuting and more time working.
Mm-hmm.
And we're showing that it's increasing productivity.
Yeah, there is data to back that up. I did some research on that, and you'll post some of these articles when the podcast drops. But some companies are saying they saw a 5 to 10% increase, and some companies are saying 30 to 40% increase in
Mm-hmm.
productivity in 2020.
Yeah, and there was research before the pandemic that showed that getting rid of somebody's commute by letting them either work from home or paying them enough to live very close to the office is the equivalent to a $40,000 raise.
Wow. I mean, can we declare at this point, D? I mean, this is something that you've been joking with me about for 15 years. Can we just declare that the whole like 8 hour workday is arbitrary and doesn't really mean anything? Like
Well,
at the end of the
yeah,
day, let's take a look at it. Yes, we technically have a chunk of time during the day where we kind of use our best efforts and energy to try to help a client or a company or whatever it is contribute toward their goal, and that tends to be around 8 hours, and that was established
mm,
because of a long time ago. You punch in and punch out, but like this whole like number, it doesn't make sense to me anymore. I feel like you're part of like a sports team when you work at one of these tech companies. Your job is to help get these products across the line and create amazing things for customers and that kind of stuff. And you get up in the morning, you jump in, you start having meetings, you start working, you start putting your head down, and you feel like it's time to back off because you're not maybe doing as great a work because you're getting tired at the end of the day or whatever. You just back off and walk away. I mean, I don't think this like 8 hour thing and this like in the office from this time until this time, and it doesn't really make any sense when you're trying to achieve a goal. It's
yeah.
just made. It's just made up.
Well, the whole point, if you go back historically, the whole point of the 8 hour work week, eight hour work day, 40-hour work week, and weekends was to draw down from the 12-hour a day, 7 day a week, 6 day a week work schedule that used to
Yeah.
exist before labor unions came in there and got things a little bit more balanced. And it was associated with a huge economic boom once we got past the Great Depression and World War II. What I would say is that it depends on the nature of your work. If the nature of your work is the productivity is directly associated with the amount of hours that you work, if you are the human equivalent of a factory machine and you're just kind of working rote action over and over and over again, number one, you're probably going to get automated away in the next 10, 20 years. But then the number of hours that you work makes sense to kind of charge in that way. If you're someone like us whose job is to think through problems and to figure things out, or if you are an innovator going out and you need to come up with new ideas for products or features, then the 8 hour workday, 40-hour work week is probably counterproductive. What is better is to have enough breaks and time away from your screen and away from this kind of rat race hamster wheel process in order to clear your mind and let your brain work to its optimum capacity.
I mean, you've said that to me a million times. You're like, hey, why don't you
Mm-hmm.
go for a run or something and then come back? Because like
The,
we get
the
into
amount of
something.
amazing ideas that you have come up with when you are on vacation, it's just astounding. Like it's always like, oh, I'm going to go on a vacation somewhere, and you come back and you're like, I had this amazing idea.
Some about the way I work. I went out for a walk yesterday, like midday, and I was like, I want to, get out and try to do like an hour long walk up this hill and like kind of power around and just chill out a little bit. And I came back and I had solved a bunch of little problems that you and I were trying to overcome for some of the work we were doing. And I told my wife, I was like, I just think that I'm built to come up with ideas when I'm moving. Like sitting for me is about getting the ideas written down or worked
Yeah.
out, like writing a test plan or something like that, right? But like when it comes to getting the ideas come from me like having motion. And I feel like if I was in an office, honestly, I'd feel motivated to just stay there, stay in the office or follow what everyone else is doing instead of doing what I know is best for me, which is like getting out, getting fresh air and thinking through problems that way. And I agree with you 100%. There are some jobs out there for sure that you cannot work remotely and just kind of work toward goals rather than hours. But in our industry or whatever, I think we're actually seeing that people are more productive that way. They're happier that way. Like I once read an article, a research article that said that it was like a human resources research article. And it said, it was a while back, but it was something about, like the more choices that they gave employees and the more time they gave to kind of make their own schedule, the
Hmm.
more work got done and at a higher degree.
Yeah. Well, people don't necessarily understand. I mean, all of this is basically human nature, right? If you are in the same place, staring at the same screen, working on the same programs, you're going to tend to think the same way. And if that thought process hasn't produced an answer to the question that you're trying to solve, then the best thing you can do is get yourself out of that environment so that you can free your brain up to process things differently.
Mhm.
That's what happens to me. Like if I'm encountering a problem, like some kind of I don't know how to analyze this data in order to make sense of it or something like that, I'll walk away from it, and my the background processing in my mind will serve up the answer when I'm outside watering plants or something.
Agreed.
It's just kind of how it works. The best way in order to get a different perspective is literally to change your environment.
Yeah. So that's it, D. I'm sorry. I'm heading to Hawaii tomorrow. I'm gonna go swimming and relax, and I promise I'll solve all the little problems that we have that we're trying to work out for our clients. Okay.
Okay. Well, I assuming that we're changing our focus to like jet skis or something in the near future.
Oh, that sounds great. But on the flip side to that, there's something else going on right now that I want to talk to you about, and that is burnout.
Yeah.
So burnout is actually a term that it's actually a medical term to some extent. If you research it, it's people who are kind of they're overworked and overstressed, and it causes a lot of problems from high blood pressure to all kinds of things, and people just feel sick. They feel unwell, basically.
Hmm.
And recent studies have indicated that there's a high level of burnout right now. And then a follow up study indicated that 1 in 4 people across industries are thinking about quitting their job, starting a new career, or doing something different. What
Yep.
do you make of that?
I think it's a good thing. I think that ultimately burnout is not at an all-time high. I think it is being reported, recognized and reported accurately for the first time in quite some time. And one of the
Yeah.
reasons for that is if you think about how we just kind of work as people. When you're in the middle of something, you don't realize how burned out you are. You don't when you're doing something and you're up and moving around, and then you think about this process where you're up and you're working around. You've been doing it for a long time, and then you sit down and take a moment, and it suddenly hits you how tired you are.
Yep.
That I think is kind of where we are. People are at the point now where they've been working nonstop for who knows how long. All of our friends in the tech industry, they work 12-hour days. They work eight
Yep.
hour days just in meetings, and then all of their actual work gets done after hours. They're reaching that point where they have a little bit more money because they're being paid in RSUs and things like that. So and investments are up, the stock market is up, and so they don't feel the economic pressure quite as much as they did before, and they're not commuting. So and the kids are going back to school, so they're getting that lull where they can take stock, and they're realizing, okay, I'm burned out. I kind of want to make a change, and once
Yeah.
they make that change, and it'll, I think it'll refresh the system. I think they'll be more productive. I think new people will come into their previous positions, and because it's new to them, they will be more productive in those positions. and we're going to see kind of a refreshing of the workplace, and
Mhm.
I think it will improve things in general.
I slightly disagree with you.
Okay.
I'm gonna, yeah, and here's why. I think you are 100% correct on them if they change to feel refreshed and everything for only a period of time. And here's the reason why I say that. Some of the traditional psychology research indicates that making decisions during a time of crisis usually end up with people regretting that decision
Mm-hmm.
later once they feel more relaxed. So I feel like I agree with you in the sense that someone would make a change and then feel very good about it. But I do wonder is if you surveyed those people afterwards, let's say a year after making that change, if they said, actually what I really needed was a break. I kind of missed my old job, or like I'm okay with going back and trying to climb the ladder or whatever it is. I just needed a break. You know what I mean?
I think it'll depend on the nature of the new job that they got. I think if they take their time and they take stock of themselves and what they want, and are honest with themselves about what they get, and they don't feel like they need to hurry up and get a new job, and they get the right job, then it'll be
Hmm.
good for them.
Absolutely.
But I will push back a little bit because I don't necessarily feel like this is a time of crisis anymore. I think that the government is stabilized. I think that the pandemic, while people are still getting sick, and the Delta variant is circulating, the infection rates and death rates are way down. Things are opening up. I think that if people made the change 6 months ago, when our country was under attack by people storming the Capitol
Yeah.
and people were dying left and right, then I think it would be a terrible time in order to make choices. But now that things are kind of stabilizing, we're coming out of it. I think people are in a better mindset, better
I
headspace.
would agree with that. The time of crisis that I was actually referring to, just to be clear, was the burnout, meaning that
Yeah.
if you and I made a sound decision, so like if we sat down and we're like, okay, we're feeling pretty good, business is good, the economy's reopened, people are back to school, we're feeling really good, and you and I sat down and had lunch one day, and we started toying around with this idea of opening an office in Hawaii because we really love it there, right? I feel like that would be a sound decision. But like if in the middle of being really tired and kind of burned out and been working for 16 straight months and that kind of stuff, we're like, I'm so burned out, I just want to move to Hawaii. And then you just like move to Hawaii and open an office. I wonder if like regret would kick in because it wasn't really fully thought through. That's all I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
you
I'd
know what I
agree with
mean?
that. But at the same time, that's why I said, like, if they don't rush into something new,
Yeah.
then I think it would be great. So if anybody out there who's considering this, take a month off, just sit at home, decompress, then start thinking about, like, give it even like several weeks to a month before you even consider what you want to do next.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you are in a place of economic hardship, in which case I get it. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I do have another prediction though I think you're going to laugh at. I think that, and I know this is slightly controversial and some of these people might reach out to me and be mad at me, but I think a third of the people that moved to Lake Tahoe will handle 3 winters there and they're moving back to the Bay Area.
It's not the winters anymore; it's the summers.
Yeah, is it just because it's so busy? We don't
It's
really go in
gonna
the summer
be
that often.
no, it's gonna be hot and smoky.
Oh yeah. So sorry, I know everybody loves Lake Tahoe. I love it too. It's very beautiful. But like
Yeah,
so many people flocked there, and I'm like, how many of these people really understand how brutal those winters can be? And as you're saying, summers now. So like I don't know. I feel like people are going to come back. I mean, not necessarily to the Bay Area. They can go to Sacramento or somewhere else. But like just being in Tahoe requires a commitment to 4 full seasons.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're in Tahoe and you're thinking, okay, great, I'm gonna get on the lake for the summer and jet ski around. I've been watching Loki, so that's
Yeah.
why the jet ski comments. But if that's their thought process, and they get to August and it's 105 degrees and they're stuck inside with an air filter because of all the fires, then it's going to be a sad thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's switch over and talk about some of these predictions that we had made last year and kind of had even individual episodes on. Let's talk a little bit about like delivery, retail, and kind of this essential worker movement. So, Amazon became the go-to place for getting product during the pandemic. So their
Hmm.
numbers were up crazy. I think they had a 75% increase in revenue or something like that. And now that it's kind of like in people's behavior, in my opinion, I don't think it's going to stop. I think it'll slow down a little bit because brick and mortar retail is opening up. But
Hmm.
this ease of like 1 day delivery now, and how quickly you can get stuff, competitive pricing, that kind of stuff, I think it's just set a trend. I think COVID just basically said it was
Yeah.
already heading in that direction, and then it got accelerated drastically. And now people are so used to it. It's just like, oh, just click that button. It'll be here tomorrow morning. How do you feel about that? Same or?
I mean, I think the same way I did before. I think that the pandemic pushed a lot more people into kind of Amazon or similar retailer experiences where you order it online and it shows up, or you go somewhere and pick it up. Like I still really like curbside pickup, especially when there's
Me too.
not a ton of traffic. You get out of the house, you can drive around, see stuff, and pick something up. I think that I have seen a lot of brick and mortar retailers and restaurants turning to services. DoorDash, restaurants generally consider DoorDash to be the devil, but there's almost other services like Clover out there that they're using in order to provide this basically curbside pickup, order it ahead of time and come and pick it up, or delivery. And we're also seeing it with convenience stores and grocery stores and Home Depot. And I think you're going to see that more and more. You're going to see Shopify and Amazon working with local retailers more over time, probably Google too, in
Uh-huh.
order to enable this online shopping layer in order to for them to have either operate as essentially fulfillment centers or pickup places for people. And then I think that you're going to see the showrooming kind of boutiquing aspect of brick and mortar retail experience start to take off more and more. So it's more of a curated experience in the store.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a question mark for me because everything you said, I think, is pretty spot on, but it's going to take quite a bit of innovation from these brick and mortar companies, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're a small, like a little establishment, you gotta. This is the thing, D. We're at this point now where, like, if you're not basically signing on to all of these services and having all of these options available to your customers, they're
Mm-hmm.
just not going to come to you. You're not even going
No,
to
they're
show
not.
up in the search,
No,
right? And that to me is what worries me. I'm glad Shopify is out doing its thing because these very small VSBs or whatever, very small businesses, if they don't have those services, they just don't get the flow of
no,
customers.
but I mean, I look around at the stores that I frequent in my neighborhood, and stores that did not used to be online are now online.
Yeah.
And some of these are just like corner stores who, mom and pop shops who are now like, oh, hey, you know what? I've got to modernize. If I'm an older ownership, then I've got like a younger person, like a nephew or a neighborhood kid who's helping me with a turnkey solution, just
Uh
get
huh.
online.
Yeah.
And it's happening. It absolutely is. And some of them are going to go out of business. Some of them are just like, no, I don't want to do that. And they might go out of business. And that's just kind of the nature of businesses. Sometimes you've got to have a refresh out there so that things continue to improve.
What do you think
But
about like I don't remember the exact date, but it was like maybe it was the 70s or 80s, whatever, when strip malls became like a really big thing. And lately, strip malls have been starting to disappear, actually. So, do you think that we're going to get back to this place where people are like driving to strip malls and walking from store to store and buying product? Or do you feel like it's going to just be whittled down to just necessary places or places that people just absolutely love?
well, I think the malls are the ones that are going away first.
Yeah.
Like the big shopping malls, we've seen a couple of them kind of turn into ghost towns around here, and we're in Silicon Valley with like 7 or 8 million people in this metro area, and some of the shopping malls are going away. But you go into certain like very nice walkable areas like downtown Los Gatos or Palo Alto, and people are doing well. I think the problem that they're running into there, as far as running a business, is not so much that people are not going to them. It's a little bit more that the rents are completely out of control, and
Yeah.
if if they can work things out with landlords who don't understand the retail business, then I think it'll be fine for them. But I do think that from a user perspective, people are going to want to get out. They're going to want to see things. They want shopping is can become a fun hobby. You look around, you see what's available, and you see that with men in certain stores, and you see that with women in other stores. And once you get more into kind of like that showrooming, boutiquing experience, where it's less about just storing a bunch of commodities and more
Hmm.
about showcasing what are the cool products you might not know about, then we're going to see some advancement.
Oh, I'll tell you a great story. So in our area, we used to have this killer toy store. I mean, the best. It was like FAO Schwartz style. You walk in, they had Jurassic Park not even replicas, the actual dinosaur heads from Jurassic Park on the wall. Every toy that you can imagine that you can touch and play with, things that I have never seen before because I would never think to search for it. Just like the coolest little wind up toys to bottle rockets to all these different things, right? Fabulous store. Well, the store shut down right before the pandemic
Yep.
and disappeared. And it kind of really put a sour, a sad mood. I almost said sour, but I mean a sad mood basically in our area because everyone loved that store and everyone would buy from there, but they just could not compete with the prices that people would get on Amazon and other places. And it was family owned. And, I'm sure there was other reasons for them to shut
Yeah.
down after whatever, 50 years or whatever. Then we started thinking about, oh, okay, well, where else can you go and actually shop for toys? Toys are one of those things where I mean, you want to go and see it and play with it and try it out and
Mm-hmm.
say, do I really want to own this? Well, Toys R Us is gone. When I was growing up, we had KB. KB Toy is gone.
Yep.
Um, we are missing a true toy store. Like that is
Well,
something that
yeah.
I
I mean,
cannot do online. I cannot find these bug kits for like gathering bugs and observing them and all this stuff, because I didn't even think to search for it. But when you go in the
yeah.
store and you see it, you go, oh, that would be a cool toy for so and so's birthday, right? Like, so I want FAO Schwartz to come back. I want those experiences to come back. And I don't know that they will.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's a retail problem per se. I think that is ultimately whenever I hang out with people who are kind of in that toy age, kids who are like 12 and under, they spend probably three to four times more of their time on Minecraft and Roblox and Fortnite than they do playing with physical toys.
Yeah.
And I think that is ultimately what is driving that phenomenon. Beyond that, it's the reality that if you are a toy store, there's so many different options out there for toys. You can't stock it all. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And the best way to be successful is to be basically a franchise tag store like a Lego store or a Disney store or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that was used to be one of our outings. I would pick my son up from school and we go straight to the Lego store, and he just wanted to play for like an hour. And usually, we buy something small or something, but like just the idea of going in and seeing everything, building, talking to other kids, like it was kind of an experience. And we haven't done
Mhm.
that since because he's unvaccinated. But
Yeah.
I think about those experiences and I realize that those are like the true retail experiences that I really, really kind of miss. And talking about that, I wanted to jump into the kids going back to school and the parents pulling back from teaching. So, one of the things I realized during the pandemic was the accelerated use of tech in
Hmm.
areas of education that never got touched before and now are fully like embedded. And one of the examples is that kids, obviously had to do Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. And probably the kids learning how to engage over technology and stuff like that is awesome. But they also had to really jump in and start using these management tools like Google Education and stuff like that. And what I realize is I think a lot of the schools are going to continue to use it. I think this
Hmm.
was like a big push to kind of move the education system deeply into tech. And I don't think that's changing.
They've been investing in Google Classroom for a long time, and let me tell you, like, thinking back to what it was like to be a student, even in college, when I was taking notes by hand and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I think that there is a lot of improvements that have been made over what we used to deal with. And I also think that a lot of the software that's been thrown out there and services are they've been cobbled together and thrown out there, and they need to have another generation of two in order to figure it out. I think that a lot of the model for online learning needs to be very different from what it is in the classroom. It's like going from theater to cinema, right? It's
Yeah.
the experience is different. It needs to be designed different.
Yeah. One of the things that came to mind the other day was that if you get your Google tools all set up, right, for your school, and all the kids are logged into it and associated with it, and then they go back to school, if you have any other issues with the pandemic, you can quickly just snap your fingers and say, everyone stay home for a week,
Yeah,
log into Google Classroom, get into your classes, work on your work. We'll see you back the following Monday.
yeah,
Same thing with kids that are feeling sick, right? You don't want kids toughing it out and going to school sick anymore, right? Just like you don't want adults going into the office. So you could just say, oh, just log on to a Google Classroom. Everything will be available in there. You can work on it while you're home. Once you feel better, we'll see you back at school, right? I feel like this is like a great way to kind of find that middle ground of like in-person learning, good socialization among kids, but also seamless integration into working from
hmm
home if you need to.
Well, I think that the remote doesn't necessarily have to be from home. Also, I think that there's possibilities for doing some remote while you're at school. I think one of the biggest advantages of being in a school is the social interaction, getting socialized, learning how to interact with other kids and adults, and having those different experiences. But if you think about what it was like, when you, for example, were taking like a language class,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be cool if you're taking a Spanish class from somebody in Spain or Peru or Mexico or something like that, where maybe you're in a classroom and you're on a form of a remote call, but you're actually learning from people all over the world.
That would be amazing. There was a little tech company about 10 or 15 years ago that came out, and it was before it all became mainstream, but it was so cool. Like if you wanted to learn Japanese, you would just click one button on your phone and it would immediately connect with a Japanese person. And then
Hmm.
they weren't teaching you Japanese, they would just help you practice it.
Yeah,
So like instantly they just start talking to you and you have to start talking back to them. And then they would help you kind of work through it. And you can engage with them for like an hour or something like that. And then you
yeah,
like pay for that time. Yeah. Like imagine being in the classroom. They're like, okay, kids, all right, we've just done this whole lesson now. You're going to spend the next 30 minutes. Click on this button. You'll connect with your remote buddy in Peru
yeah.
and you can practice your language. I mean, so many opportunities, right?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things we've noticed from, or that I've noticed from the at home schooling thing that people aren't necessarily noticing as much is part of the problem is the fact that parents are overworked. Like
Yeah.
so many people that I know are not working 40 hours a week. And they're
Hmm.
working, 60 plus hours a week, and they're trying to help their kids out with schooling on top of that. And part of that's driven by there's just in the tech industry, there's a shortage of workers. It's existed for quite a long time, and it's flown under the radar. But you have people regularly doing the work of two or three people, and that makes it very difficult for them to provide the support for homeschooling.
Oh, I would agree with that. I mean, a lot of the whispers and conversations I've heard from a lot of people during this time was, "Hey, I just want to accelerate my retirement so I can actually spend time helping my kids out and being part of their life because the 60 plus hours plus doing the work plus worrying about viruses, worrying about this and that uh, puts life in focus where you look at it and you go, okay, there are some things that are more important than just grinding it out every day. There needs to be some sort of balance there. And I know everyone talks about like there is no balance. You just work your butt off, and that's just part of the game and all this kind of stuff. But that only goes for a certain amount of time, and then eventually people get burned out and they bail on you. And one of the things that I've realized when it comes to corporate retention is that you don't want to lose institutional knowledge People
Yeah.
who have worked at your company for 5 or 10 years and just are killing it, and they have so much deep institutional knowledge. You don't want them to take that and go over to their competitor just because their competitor said you can have some time off to take a deep breath.
It's much better to retain good employees if you have them. People have so much value. And I
Absolutely.
keep having this conversation with people who are in the position where they're thinking about trying to ask for a raise or getting a new job. And it's like, you have to understand, and you talk to people who hire people or people who are running companies, and the value of a good employee, someone who's going to be reliable, who's going to produce good work, someone that not going to have to micromanage, is almost impossible to overstate. So for them to recognize their own value, and I think that this kind of correction in wages that is starting to happen is good for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, one of the things that has been marinating with me is how companies will sometimes, you know, it, especially when you're like a bigger company and that kind of stuff. I think there's used to be an assumption that there's just a lot of great people out there. And I've kind of realized that yes, there are a lot of great people out there, but it takes time to integrate those great
Mm-hmm.
people into your company. So, like when you hire somebody, that's new and who's amazing, it might take them 3 years before
Yeah,
they're really, really moving along. You know what I mean? And it's like that's a
yeah,
long time to have to give up on somebody who had been there for a while and just needs a little
yeah.
extra support.
Well, there's an analysis that I saw in Silicon Valley that there are more jobs than there is housing in order to support those jobs.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's a big one. And all that stuff will have to get worked out over time. And I think we're just kind of in the beginning of this new norm. And I think that because remote working tools are so great and because, people are becoming more and more advanced in how they approach work and we're starting to learn about, burnout and all that kind of stuff. I'm hoping we can look back in 3 years and say, hey, we're in a lot better place than we were in 2016 or 17. And things are just humming along quite nicely. The last area, though, I wanted to address before we talk about our predictions for the future is investment markets, something that you have been passionately talking to me about for a while. So,
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, and I made this kind of statement a while ago, and Michael Burry, one of the humans that the movie The Big Short was inspired by,
uh,
also made the claim that investment markets are overinflated. They're overinvested right now. It's basically a bubble. And I think that's been partially driven by the pandemic, by people not taking vacations or going out and going to bars or going out and spending money on activities and things. And now that things are opening up, I think that some of those people who are looking at like, hey, I've got all this money in this investment and I want to buy a new car, or I want to go on this big trip to Europe, or I want to do these things or buy something else, then they might liquidate some of their investments. So some of the meme stocks that took off because of a lot of the hype around them, some of the cryptocurrencies that got heavily invested into because people
huh.
weren't spending money on other things, you might see them take a dip in value. And for some of them that are have weaker fundamentals, it might be more than a dip. So I
Yeah.
think that a big market correction might be coming.
So let me just summarize what you just said there, just to be clear, because you kind of went kind of quickly over it in the beginning there, is that your thinking is that during the pandemic, people were kind of hunkering down and they were just pumping their money into investments because they had no other place to put it, meaning they weren't going on vacation. They really weren't buying themselves anything. They were just putting it into investments and just working all
Mm-hmm.
day long. Now that things are opening up, people are like, okay, I'm going to cool off on my investments. I'm going to start putting money into travel, start putting money into, outdoor activities or whatever it is, in addition to actually liquidating some of those investments in
Yep.
order to go buy myself nice things and go on these extravagant vacations that we keep hearing about through Airbnb and other travel companies that are reporting like record numbers. So that's what you're saying. So
Yep.
basically, it cools off that side of the market because like one of the things that you had brought up, I think on a couple podcasts back or something like that, was that we turned from investing our money into other things to being very, very bored. And that's why you were seeing a lot of the meme stock investments. People are just bored. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to gamble on some of these stocks by day trading every day.
Hmm.
Right.
I
Do you see a
think so.
pullback
Yeah.
on that? So you'll see a pullback.
And I think that part of that is, it kind of did have that gambler experience where like I put my money into the thing, it made me more money, like I'm up. And then when the markets cool down, the growth stops, maybe you start seeing some drops. Some of them might decide, okay, this isn't as fun anymore. I'm
Mhm.
gonna take my ball and go home
Got it.
because I've had my eye on this new, expensive car or computer or whatever it is. I'm gonna start putting my money in different ways.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed, if you look at the data, is that the number of people purchasing outdoor activities, board games, going camping, things like that, non-digital assets has increased a lot.
Yeah.
So people are looking to kind of get out there and actually just live a little more instead of staring at their screen all day, which makes a lot of sense. I feel the same way. Like we recently purchased a stand-up paddleboard, one of the inflatable ones, and took it out to the water near us and just had a blast on it. And I was like, man, this is so easy.
Oh yeah.
I should carry this thing in my car everywhere I go just so I can get out on the water more often because
Hmm.
it's so much fun. But
Oh yeah.
let's
We've definitely been eyeing some outdoor furniture and like just getting out.
yeah, have you ever read that report as a side note? Have you ever read that report that tells you the best time of the year to buy certain things in order to get the best deals? Have you ever there's actually a time of the
I've
year when you can
seen
buy
it
things?
before. What I've heard from some of my friends is that if you're looking at getting like some of these outdoor couches and kind of gazebos or pergolas and things like that, this is actually, ironically, a really good time to do it.
Yes. So the best time to buy it is the end of July all the way until the end of August.
Mm,
That's when you get the best deals because everyone else buys their stuff in March, getting ready for the summertime. And
yeah,
instead you buy it at the end of the summer and you get a killer deal. And that's exactly what we did actually like two
yeah.
years ago.
Well, let
We
me tell
needed
you, man, they have these portable hot tubs. I've
Mm.
seen them on Amazon. They're like $500. Like the reviews for them are great. Like Coleman has some and stuff like that. It's very, very tempting, man. I miss having a hot tub so bad.
Well, hot tubs are also a perfect place for raccoons to take baths at nighttime. So make sure you cover
Yeah, you should definitely cover it.
it. All right, let's talk about our predictions for the future. So I'll go first since I had written up some notes here. But I think remote work is going to be a norm for a lot of people that work in these industries and even more industries as they continue to embrace technology in the future. I think that the pandemic was a big push forward, showed everyone what's possible. Technology is better than it's ever been. I think we're kind of going to stay on that. When it comes to delivery of food and goods, I think those are going to increase as well in the future. I think Amazon's only going to get bigger. I think that a lot of these restaurants and stuff are just going to get really good at packaging up food and getting it to your house quickly. And I think people are going to embrace that as an option, not as a 100% like it was during the pandemic, but just as an option. I think that brick and mortar is going to struggle for quite some time, but I think that the hot stores will do well. I think people will still want to go and get a fresh made Jamba Juice. I also think people will want to go to toy stores. I think they'll want to go inside of the Targets and pick things up every once in a while. But I think that if they keep things like curbside pickup and delivery, then just becomes another option for these businesses. I think travel is going to grow drastically in the leisure area, but I think it's going to stagnate in business. I think that a lot of businesses have realized that it's extremely expensive to send a whole bunch of employees places to conferences and all that kind of stuff. And I think they're going to just look at it and say, well, it's expensive. It's also slightly risky, especially as variants, start to
Hmm.
emerge from the pandemic. And so we'll just cut down a little bit. But I think that individuals are just like, I think everyone just wants to get out and get away for a while. Like I think that leisure travel is going to be big for the next 3 years. And I also think that we're going to continue to see people embrace outdoor activities, which I love a lot, and more physical things. I think board games, camping, seeing friends on walks, that kind of. I think you're just going to see a lot more of that happening as a way of relaxing yourself from all of the tech engagement that's happening. And we can circle back next year and kind of see where we're at. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. What about you?
I think that I think you're spot on with a lot of this. I think that what we're going to see to some extent is for a lot of the essential workers, and what essential work as well as some of the white collar kind of tech work is going to experience a bit of a change just because there's just a shortage of workers overall, and that is going to kind of force this rethinking of how some of that work kind of gets done. One of the things that I've seen is that my partner's a chef, and a lot of her coworkers or former coworkers have during the pandemic they went and got jobs at Amazon. And as
Hmm.
much as Amazon gets flack for kind of mistreating their workers a bit, it turns out that's a lot better than the restaurant industry. So a lot of them have liked it and they've stayed there. So restaurants and a lot of other jobs that have traditionally kind of underpaid their workers and been in high stress environments, they've had to adapt a little bit. And I think we're going to see more than that. Same thing with white collar companies. I think they're going to have to, or white collar jobs, tech companies, things like that. They're going to have to be a little bit of a rethinking of how the work gets done.
Yeah.
The other thing, I think when it comes to brick and mortar, we're going to continue to see this melding of digital and brick and mortar. I think there's gonna be much more commonplace for brick and mortar places to have online presences and to have shopping experiences occur 50% online, and kind of the experience in store to be a little bit more of less a get in get out experience and more of a come in have fun. Is we're going to try to make this like a pleasurable experience being in the store kind of experience. And I think that when it comes to outdoor activities, I think that tech is going to infiltrate that a little bit also.
No.
Sorry, man. I mean, we've seen this happen for a while, right? You think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
you surf, and now everybody has a GoPro while they're out there surfing, so they can get
That's true.
some great
Yeah.
footage and stuff. We're going to see stuff like that happen more. I think mountain bikers and kind of AR in order for pathfinding and things like that is really helpful. And I think for the first time, hopefully, it will be less kind of clunky one step away from a prototype kind of integration, and we're going to start seeing things happen more smoothly and less intrusively. And
Yeah.
even
That
just
makes
if you
sense.
imagine somebody out backpacking in the backcountry, just having a safety mechanism where if they get lost or if they get hurt or something like that, it's easy to locate them for a search and rescue operation.
Yep.
That is a huge advancement.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, tech kind of creeps in a lot of different areas. In some areas, it really enhances it, and some areas it drastically changes it. Right. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I agree with you. Well, I think this is a wrap for today's episode. Thanks to everyone so much for taking the time to listen. This is our second to last episode of this season. So I can't believe it. I mean, we've done 37, 38. I think we end close to 40 or 40 episodes so far. It's been a lot of fun and we're having a great time doing it. But Demetrius and I do need a little break, and we're going to be talking to some interesting people who we think might want to come on the podcast and talk about the work that they do or their topics. As always, we'll be posting links to many of the sources that we referenced on Twitter. So you can find us and follow us on Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast and the number one. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you again for our final episode next week. Oh, and just a reminder, just as we did last season, our final episode is going to be a hyped up episode. So tune in. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Goodbye, everyone.